Good evening. My name's Andrew Hudson, and I'm here tonight with my daughter Emily, who is the winemaker at Veritas Vineyard. We'd like to say, to start with, thank you to all our supporting customers and people that we've had that have been buying wines from us. We've had tremendous response from the community, and we are forever grateful for that. So Emily, tell us what we're going to do tonight.
So tonight, virtual tasting number 4, which has been a long road and a wonderful road. We've really enjoyed tasting with you. Tonight we have 2 Sauvignon Blancs. We have a 2019 and a 2012. And we'll start with the 19 and then we'll taste the 12. And this is a non-traditional tasting because not often would you taste an aged Sauvignon Blanc, but I think it's a really great lesson, and my dad and I have talked through this quite a bit, in what happens to a wine when it ages. And I think that's the most obvious in a Sauvignon Blanc, and so it's a good example of that. And we spent a lot of time going through the cellar to choose out an older Sauvignon Blanc that's showing well and is really beautiful to drink, to juxtapose with our fresh, young 2019 Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
But before we start, we loved last week, actually 2 weeks ago, our last virtual tasting. We loved your input. It was the best part of our day and our tasting. So we'd like to encourage that again. Please ask questions. We're going to have a few questions for you throughout. So, I may ask a question and I want some thumbs up or some smiley faces. So please feel free to engage and be a part of this tasting with us, because it makes it more dynamic and more fun for us as well. And then sometimes we're not sure what your questions are. So we want to make sure and engage your questions and your concerns in our tasting as well.
Very good. Thank you, Emily. I'm going to start off by just reviewing the history of you probably all know that the grape originated in France. And in France, at the very beginning of the world, there were 2 styles of Sauvignon Blanc. One was from Bordeaux, and the other was from the Loire Valley and was called Sancerre. And those 2 styles of wine were very different, but they were the standard wines that one appreciated as a Sauvignon Blanc. Then came along New Zealand, and the old world style, which was the French style, was supplanted by the really wonderful wines that were being made in New Zealand.
2 very different styles. I mean, not just worlds apart, but also as you taste these wines, they're just classically different.
So we typically talk of like the New World style, which is a New Zealand style, which is fresh and full of passion fruit and complex tropical fruits. And we talk of the Old World style, which is more Sancerre, and that's much more minerality and greenness in the wine. And so often people ask us, where are we between the Old World and the New World? And I think the answer, Emily, is that we're in the middle.
Yes, right in between. And part of that has to do with the fact that we have a number of different clones on property, and we'll get to all those details as we go, but we do have a very classically styled Old World style clone, which is, as my dad said, very mineral, very linear, very acid-based. And we also have a New World style clone, which shows more of the passion fruit and the guava and sort of the more fruit-forward, fruit-driven qualities. So maybe let's get to the wines. For those of you at home that have the wines, we'll start with the 2019, so the young, vivacious version of the Sauvignon Blanc. So if you have it at home, crack it open and let's pour it in our glasses. Dad, do you want to tell us about some of the basics of our vineyard here?
Yes. And it's very interesting because we planted Sauvignon Blanc as our very first foray into the wine world. And we recognized that one of our best growing regions on the whole farm was what we call the Upper Meadow. And in order to make sure that we were planting the correct grapes, we invited Tony Wolfe, who is the state viticulturalist, the state expert in growing grapes.
Yes.
And we told him that we wanted to plant Sauvignon Blanc, and he said, "No, I'm sorry, that won't work."
Absolutely said no.
You should plant Merlot. And like all advice, which you don't pay for, we decided to go ahead and plant Sauvignon Blanc.
But there's actually a bigger backstory to that. It wasn't just that we just decided to plant Sauvignon Blanc. Sauvignon Blanc is a very important wine to us as a family.
To both of us. Yeah.
And one of my most vivid memories as far as growing up in wine was sharing a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc with my mom and my dad by the pool in Florida. Do you remember that?
I do. It was a Cloudy Bay.
Cloudy Bay. And it was one of those moments where I can remember just swirling the glass and smelling the glass and swirling the glass and really trying to tease out all of the different smells I could smell. Is it gooseberry, which is a hard descriptor, but is it fresh cut grass? Is it guava? Is it passion fruit? There were so many descriptors, and of course it was so fresh and vivacious too.
Yes, I think when I first tasted Cloudy Bay, I went sort of, OMG, this wine is absolutely fantastic. Like Emily said, I could hardly categorize the number of flavors and aromas that were captured in the wine, together with that sort of that mystic minerality, that quality that is so hard to describe in a Sauvignon Blanc. But the Cloudy Bay had that wine, and I think that had a big influence on us deciding to plant Sauvignon Blanc on our top meadow.
We definitely, as a family, when we were looking at what grapes we wanted to grow and what grapes would grow well on our farm, we all kind of looked at each other and said, well, we would really like to try Sauvignon Blanc, despite everybody's opinion to the contrary.
Right.
So we did decide on the top meadow to plant Sauvignon Blanc, and there's a lot of reasons why it has been successful for us.
Yes, we rolled the dice, and one of the things we've realized actually is that the elevation was critically important, because higher up that we get the wind coming down through the Rockfish Valley, and it sort of keeps the grapes dry, and that is very important in Virginia, where we have a large disease threat from humidity. And the winds blowing through the Sauvignon Blanc have kept them nice and dry, and have staved off the disease pressure that you would otherwise have felt.
The other thing about Sauvignon Blanc that's harder to explain, but I'll do my best, is that the grapes on Sauvignon Blanc, the cluster is so tight. So it wouldn't be like a cluster of grapes you get at the grocery store, where they're very loose. There's a lot of space in between the grapes. With Sauvignon Blanc, the oval-shaped grapes are so tight in the cluster that they actually have flat sides. So the wind is so important, because it helps to dry it out and not keep all that water in the crevices of the cluster, which would allow things or molds to grow. So the wind just dries it all out and keeps it beautiful. We also... the aspect of our Sauvignon Blanc is more north-facing, which is cooler.
Yes.
And so with Sauvignon Blanc, and we'll get to that in the winemaking, one of the main things that we look at as far as is it ripe, is it perfect, is actually the acid structure of the wine.
Right.
That makes up the backbone.
Right. And people talk about cool climate viticulture. And Sauvignon Blanc is a grape that rejoices in cool climate. And that's why we planted it where we did. And we've been very, very fortunate. If you look at the number of wineries making Sauvignon Blanc in Virginia, there aren't very many actually. And we are so happy that we've been able to capture what I call the varietal character of Sauvignon Blanc. When you come across Veritas Sauvignon Blanc, there is no other white wine that could be.
Yes.
It's absolutely varietally correct, and we're very proud of that fact. So Emma, tell us about the intricacies of making Sauvignon Blanc in terms of wine making.
Sure. So when you actually smell this wine, it's fresh. It's, I'm going to say green. I don't mean underripe, but it's got these wonderful lime zest characters. All of that I have to be very careful with in winemaking. So Sauvignon Blanc is one of the first grapes that we bring in, sparkling Chardonnay being just before that. So it's one of our first white grapes. My biggest job with Sauvignon Blanc is to be as gentle as possible with this juice because the aromatics are very delicate. So in order to do that, it's basically an anaerobic process. And
what does anaerobic mean?
Anaerobic
that's a big word.
That's
a big word.
It is yes. Anaerobic means without oxygen. So when I put the grapes in the press, and by the way, welcome to our tasting room. So the press is just on the other side of this wall. When I put the grapes in the press, the whole job of the press is just to squeeze the juice out of the grapes and down into a tray and then down into a tank. And I actually put dry ice in the press tray. And what the dry ice does is, of course, as you've seen at Halloween and all sorts of antics with dry ice forms this white cloud. But that cloud is also, it is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is keeps all the oxygen out. So it blankets the juice and keeps all those fresh aromatics. And also, I left out, we chill those grapes just as cold as we can get them overnight, so that juice is cold, the dry ice keeps it cold, it's completely anaerobic, and my whole job in that processing is to keep all of these beautiful fresh aromatics in the juice and safe.
Yes, that's a great point, Emily. A good comparison is to think of a Granny Smith apple, and if you leave it exposed to the air, it turns brown. And that's a process of oxidation. And with our Sauvignon Blanc, our goal is to keep the juice when we're making the wine green. And if you don't use the anaerobic process, the juice will turn brown in a just blink of an eye. And we absolutely concentrate on keeping oxygen away from the wine as part of the process of capturing those really intense flavor profiles that Emily has just described.
And Dad is exactly right. I mean, the juice is green. It's beautiful. It's one of, obviously, Sauvignon Blanc being early in harvest, it's one of my favorite grapes to work with because I'm full of energy and ready to go. So then...
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. Emily, I like to mention that when we first start harvest, we're so full of enthusiasm. And Sauvignon Blanc is lucky because it gets all our energy, doesn't it?
Yes,
right,
and you can feel it and you can taste it in the glass. And that's the nature of the grape. You know, there's nothing we actually do very much other than preserve the juice. The nature of this grape is to be, you know, fresh, acid-driven, lime zest. That's just what it wants to do. And so if you can capture that in a glass, then you have managed to capture all the nuances of what Sauvignon Blanc is. And on the palate, Dad, did you want to talk about?
The striking thing is the acidity. You know, people talk about high acidity or pronounced acidity, but the acidity is the thing that gives this wine the zing. You know, it gives it that sort of extra special flavor tingle, which is also interpreted as minerality. And the acidity and the minerality go together to give you this sort of almost metallic, almost chalky feel to the mouth, in addition to the fruit flavors and all the complexities that we have in a Sauvignon Blanc. And tonight we wanted to compare how we've got this bright, zingy acidity with our 2019 Sauvignon Blanc, with our 2012 Sauvignon Blanc, in which, if I had to encapsulate the difference, I would say that the 2019 is bright and fresh, and 2012 is mellow yellow. It's soft. It's much more contained. It's got that sort of just delicate complexity that is so different to the bright flavors, and that's why we wanted to compare the two with you tonight, so that you could appreciate what happens when a wine that starts out like our 2019 ends up like our 2012.
Sure.
They're both beautiful wines.
And then I'm going to just take a step backwards a little bit. I know you were just getting into 2012, but I don't know where everybody is out there, but we just had a rain shower, and I think that is one of the most that explains minerality the most. If you go outside just after a rain shower, and just smell the air, and you can smell the wet stone.
Yes.
And a little bit of earth. Those are the aromatics when we speak about minerality that's just encapsulated in this glass, along with the fruit and a lot of other flavors.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Some people actually refer to petrichor.
Petrichor. One of my favorite words.
But it's supposed to be a rain on gravel in northern Italy.
Yep.
That's the
very
smell
specific.
of petrichor.
Yep.
And it's just one of those things that is very enigmatic. If you asked a group of winemakers or wine people about what is minerality, you'll get a whole host of different answers.
Sure. It is a hard thing to tell people you can smell minerality. It's a hard thing because that's not something people catalog as much as they catalog lime zest or rose petal or other aromatics. But the next time it rains, go outside and just take a deep lungful and just smell that in and sink it in, and it really does capture a lot of what we're trying to explain in this glass of Sauvignon Blanc. So if you have the 2012 at home, go ahead and crack that one open.
I'll crack this one open then.
Yes, well, I already did that
you already
for
cracked
you.
It?
2012. What I love about this wine
2012.
What I love about this wine is that it has held its brightness. I know we keep using the word acidity, and as my dad was talking, I was trying to think of another word to use instead of acidity, but I'm very proud of this 2012 because it is still showing so fresh. It still has a backbone. It is showing age, and this is not something typically you would taste, a Sauvignon Blanc 8 years apart. But I love the nuances of the age that is showing here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, if we compare the two, the aroma is almost as pronounced, not quite as bright as
not
the
as
2000,
fruity.
but you would expect that. And the thing that you appreciate actually is a sort of a lovely aroma of what I think is a sort of almost like straw, like hay, and there's a very subtle sort of dried fruit. It's all the nice things that you like in a wine that's aged, and the wine is so much more mellow, but it still is bright and still has got a very good acid, and it's the texture that I think is particularly nice. And you could almost describe it as being a savory wine.
Sure.
Yeah.
It has a savory quality, and what I just picked up on as I smelled. And it's very important to go from one to the other because that's when you're going to really see the differences. I think that's one of the best learning tools is to have them side by side, so you can go back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah.
But what I just appreciated that I didn't earlier is the 19, the younger wine. You get a lot of lime zest. And then when you go to the 2012, you get more of a lime marmalade. So it's not a dried fruit, but it's more of a, and it's not even more candied. It's definitely just a lime that has been cooked, for lack of a better word.
I thought about it as key lime, a key lime pie, and instead of bright lemon zest, as in the 2019, we've got lemon custard. We've got a sort of a lemon that's just more mature and more complex. They are beautiful wines to compare. And the world is divided into two groups. Ones who like the fresh wine and ones that like the mellow wine, and they're equally as good. They're equally as good, and I would recommend both wines to anyone.
And what a wonderful lesson too in just what happens as wine. We constantly talk about aging wine and what happens when you age wine, and this is just a perfect example because I can remember 2012, and it was just as fresh and bright as this one. So, did we have a question, Becca?
We do have a few questions.
Yep.
Is there anything special or unique in the storage, like temperature, etc., that you've done to coax these characteristics out of the 2012?
Oh, sure. Oh, in the library storage. No, actually, none at all. Just consistent temperature. I think that's one of the most important things when you're aging wine. I don't think it matters if it's 55 degrees or 60 degrees, just as long as it's a constant temperature. Yeah. So we are very blessed with a wonderful warehouse that just kind of holds a steady temperature, and so it is aged really well. I thought the question was, is there anything I do in the cellar before we barrel? And the same thing there. I keep it very cool, very fresh,
Throughout,
and actually, it's not in the cellar very long at all. Sauvignon Blanc is first in, first out.
And it's stainless steel.
And it's stainless steel.
Stainless steel. We use stainless steel because any exposure to wood will absorb those aromatics. And, I think that if you keep the wine at 55 degrees, it's going to age longer. Whereas if you keep it at 60, it'll age faster. So ideally, 55 is the correct temperature to age a Sauvignon Blanc. And I'm delighted that we can taste these wines tonight.
We have
such
another
an
question?
interest.
Yeah, well, actually, a perfect segue is
Yep.
actually why do you use screw caps on this wine, especially the 2012, which is aged?
Sure. So we use screw cap because that is stylistically what we're going for. So when we make the Sauvignon Blanc, we're not typically making it for aging. It's in my mind a drink now wine. That's how I make it. I'm making it for freshness, vivaciousness, and not typically making it for aging, which is, as I started this tasting this evening, I said this is kind of an atypical tasting because you don't often taste a Sauvignon Blanc with some age on it. But I thought it was a great example of what happens with a wine, that's as fresh as this as it ages.
Yes.
The screw cap kind of freezes a wine in time.
Exactly.
Keeps the freshness in, and I think you can really see this in the 2012. It's held this way.
I would suspect that if we put a cork in the 2012 wine, it would not have held the acidity as well as this has done. And the great thing about the screw cap is, as Emily said, it freezes the wine and allows the wine to mellow going forward without too much in the way of interaction with other metabolites like oxygen, etc.
Okay, one more question. We absolutely love your Viognier. How does it compare with the Sauvignon Blanc?
Okay, so repeat the question just in case.
How does Sauvignon Blanc compare with Viognier? And I would say they're comparable. They're both what I call aromatic wines. They both have these wonderful aromas of flowers and fruits, and it just, Viognier has a different spectrum
The
of
biggest
fruit.
difference is acid.
Yes, and Sauvignon Blanc has got much more acid.
And Viognier has very little.
But the spectrum in Viognier is peach, apricot, orange blossom. The spectrum in Sauvignon Blanc is lemon, lime, grapefruit, passion fruit, guava, all sorts of exotic tropical fruits. They're very comparable wines, and I say that when I'm doing a tasting with people, that the Sauvignon Blanc and the Viognier are both wonderful examples of aromatic grapes. The contrast, of course, is a Chardonnay. A Chardonnay has nothing like the aromatic intensity of these two wines.
Typically, yeah. So.
Is the Sauvignon Blanc an actual grape?
Yes, so it is. Sauvignon Blanc is a varietal, so that's the name of the grape. And we actually have, we started with 2 clones of Sauvignon Blanc, so anytime you have a grape, you can also have clones of that specific grape. So when we started planting, we planted clone 1 and then a Muscat clone, so that was the basis of our Sauvignon Blanc. And then as we grew, now we have 3 more clones on Toby's field, which is a slightly lower elevation. So we're really looking at, with clones, actually what we were looking for was a clone that had a slightly less tight cluster. But actually we've kind of ended up with our original 2 clones as being 2 of our favorite.
The major ones, yes.
Yeah.
The clonal variation provides complexity in the wine.
Yes.
We felt that having 2 clones was not enough, and we wanted more complexity, so we added another 3, didn't we? And we do have it now, a variety of different clones that we're very happy with, and they really contribute to the amazing complexity of this wine.
Lovely. Last question I have right here for right now is there anywhere else in Virginia that they can buy Sauvignon Blanc, or is it just in Veritas?
Oh, sure. So Sauvignon Blanc isn't a widely planted grape in Virginia, but there are a number of wineries that are doing some beautiful Sauvignon Blanc. Stinson Vineyards comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
Barboursville, Linden up in Northern Virginia, and Glen Manor.
Yeah. Glen Manor at one point was part of Linden.
Yeah.
And Jeff White split off and...
No. Well, yes.
All right. Sorry. Delete that bit.
Those are the ones that come to mind. Sorry for anybody that we left off the list, but certainly it's not a widely planted white in Virginia. It's very site specific, and it does prefer the slightly higher elevations.
Yeah.
So.
And that's because actually the skin is quite thin on a Sauvignon Blanc. So, we all know that we have huge disease pressure in Virginia, and the fact that we have elevation is a big asset for us in keeping the grapes disease free.
Oh, actually, I'm so sorry. I'm gonna throw out more questions if they come. What foods would you pair personally with the Sauvignon Blanc?
Okay, so food pairings with Sauvignon Blanc are my favorite. Oysters. I'm a huge oyster fan. I can't get enough of oysters and Sauvignon Blanc.
For me, the ultimate expression of Sauvignon Blanc is to get asparagus straight out of the garden with a lemon and a butter sauce and a glass of Sauvignon Blanc. There is nothing as wonderful as that. And I think that's my particular favorite of Sauvignon Blanc. I absolutely love that. It has to be fresh asparagus. It has to be straight out of the garden, not asparagus that's been at Walmart for the last 5 weeks.
Or maybe right now, this time of year, from the grocery store would be fine. But it is a beautiful pairing with Sauvignon Blanc. Any other questions, Becca?
Let's see. Well, there is one question. Where does Virginia fit compared to Old World Sauvignon Blanc?
Yeah, so right smack in the middle. I think with our Clone 1, which is a classic Old World clone, and our Muscat clone, which is a more typical New World clone, since we're blending the two of those in this, I think we have aspects of both. So found a happy medium there. So we're very excited because tomorrow we are reopening, and it is equally strange to reopen as it was to close. I know a lot of you out there have your own businesses and your own work schedule, so it was so strange back in March when that all closed, and it is equally strange to open back, but we are very excited about it. We have worked hard to make sure that we have a safe environment for everybody that would like to come out and spend time with their family and experience Veritas wines and create new memories. We have put a lot of infrastructure in place. We have put up tents and picnic tables, and we have is it contactless, Rebecca?
Touch-free transactions.
Touch-free transactions. So we have done our best to make sure we have tables at the front of your reservation area, and we have a very strict policy put in place with our servers that they set your wine and your food, because the terrace will be open on your table, so that there won't be too much interaction, and it's a huge priority for us to make sure that you feel when you come and have an experience at Veritas that you feel like you're in a safe environment, and we'd like to do the same for our employees as well. So we have a reservation policy, so if you would like to come out to Veritas, just go to our website. At the very top it says make a reservation here. It's a very easy process, and for us as a family, we just wanted to make sure that we had a very clear system and want to make sure that it's a safe environment for everybody involved. So we're excited to have you back, and anything else you want to add?
I'd just like to say you're truly safe at Veritas.
We have worked very hard at this infrastructure and our reservation policy to make sure that it's seamless and that everybody has a wonderful time.
And as safe as possible.
As safe as possible.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and this weekend and the weekends to come.
And stay safe.
And stay safe.